Jane Hilderman, good to see you again. Thanks for coming in to speak with me about this information that you've garnered from former members of Parliament. Important, I think, as we have this, I think, a stepped-up conversation in this country about where we're heading in terms of partisanship, democracy, and all of those related issues. First of all, when did you speak to these former MPs? Let's get some context and a picture in time.
Sure. All of these MPs that we spoke to in this round, 54 of them, served in the 41st Parliament. Some had served longer, but that means they were there between 2011 and 2015, and they either had retired or lost their seats in the 2015 election. We spoke to them last year, so in 2017. So a few years after they had stepped aside from their public life. And
a chance to have the dust settle and maybe have some time to reflect on exactly what they'd been through.
Exactly.
So that's important. Okay, so we're going to drill down into some of the areas where they talked about how their lives on Parliament Hill were affected and perhaps hindered. But let me sort of start with the big picture. It seems to me in reading the report that they're really saying that not their constituents, not Parliament, but their parties had the biggest influence on the kind of work they did when they were here in Ottawa and back home in the riding. Why is that a concern?
Well, I think being an MP often by definition means you are a partisan. You have to be generally part of a party to get elected in Canada, so that's not in and of itself a bad thing. But what we heard from former MPs is that sort of the party identity, the way that parties have come to operate, has sort of been taken over the life of so-called being what it means to be an MP, and shapes really every facet of how you go about your job. And that, I think, is worrisome in the sense that if our parties are becoming more partisan and more aggressive sort of in their inability to want to compromise or provide collaboration, we end up in a situation where I'm not sure we're getting the best decisions.
Let's drill down on some of the areas where we can see that at work and what these members of Parliament, former members of Parliament told you. Let's start there. They're worried about the level of extreme partisanship in our politics. What are they saying about their own experience as MPs? How did that show up?
Yeah, there was a lot of MPs who said, that there is a certain amount of theater, but at the end of the day, it's quite exhausting when you're having to put on this sort of faux sense of outrage every day that you're in Ottawa, and it takes a lot of energy and doesn't feel that productive, as said. It's not adding to sort of public policy or the quality of legislation that's coming out. It's just sound and fury. And it's, I think, preventing them from having positive cross-party relationships with other MPs as well. And it
often comes down from on high, right? I mean, men and women come to Ottawa and with the best intentions and often get along very well individually, and then the party kicks in. And I mean, there's some of the testimony and some of their, they're not attributed to individual MPs, but about how parties gave orders about not to sit at dinner and don't have dinner with those people and don't be seen with those people, and that's kind of worrisome, isn't it?
It is. I think Canadians would be really surprised that it's come down to that. One MP was saying, while traveling, he initially sort of rebuffed the invitation for dinner with another MP because he wasn't from the same party, and then realized, wait a minute, like, we're not even in Ottawa, no one's going to see this, and really ended up having a great dinner conversation, but wouldn't have necessarily been able to do that in Ottawa.
Let's talk about the weekly caucus meetings. And caucus meetings, they're a key part of the life of members of Parliament and parties on Parliament Hill. It's supposed to be a chance for MPs to bring concerns of their constituents to the party leadership. But what do these former MPs say about the value of those caucus meetings? What did they say?
Well, I think this is really interesting for Canadians too, because caucus is something we don't get to peer into, right, Peter? They're kind of held behind closed doors by definition. And we're sort of told to trust that what happens behind those doors is going to produce great outcomes in terms of decisions that get made. The MPs said that sometimes some felt that those decisions were made with a full discussion, but a lot felt increasingly that caucus was treated, and caucus meetings were treated more as briefings, that they were sort of advised, okay, this is our position, now how do we sell it, how do we message it, you're going to be our ambassadors going out and doing it. So there wasn't as much input that maybe MPs thought there should be.
So for some, a disconnect there, and also what about the role? I mean, parties and MPs are supposed to have the power to check the actions of the leader, but it doesn't always happen that way, does it? I mean, some of them are telling you if you're not kind of on the right team, your access to the leader is restricted.
Yes, at times it was high school-like analogies in the sense there's clearly in-groups and out-groups too, and in-groups is an advantage in caucus in terms of sometimes having your voice heard. That said, it was interesting to see that there was, throughout the sample, a lot of respect for leaders, or their leader in particular. I think that kind of goes back to something else around local parties, in that a lot of MPs are really getting recruited into parties by their leader and feel that they owe their success in politics to that person.
And let's discuss the conflict and tension between elected MPs and the so-called, they've come to be known around here as the boys and girls in short pants on Parliament Hill in the leader's office. What did the former MPs say about their concerns about that relationship?
They had a lot of concerns in this area, and I wonder sometimes too if, out of the respect for the leader, that they take out some of their frustrations on the staff, because I know, like, we couldn't have politics without political staff. But I think there was a sense that sometimes the balance was a little off again, wherein the MPs were essentially taking the directions from the staff who had made the sort of substantive decisions without their input or consideration. Some felt that that was, like, I went so far as to sort of say it was like they felt more like puppets, or again, messengers than actual representatives.
Okay, let's talk about maybe some ideas for how to change some of this on Parliament Hill. What about the idea of extreme partisanship? And we see it a lot around here. What are some thoughts on how maybe we move away from that?
It's a great question, and it's hard. This is culture, and it's hard to say to everybody, you legislate, you got to be friends. But I think, talking to some of the MPs who'd been around even longer, sort of said, like, slowly a lot of the socializing space that they used to lean on to get to know one another has disappeared. They don't travel as much anymore as committee members. There's not much space on the Hill even that's open for MPs from different parties to gather together, other than maybe the restaurant. But the time and schedules are crunching such that there's not a lot of meal times that they're having together anymore. So there were some suggestions from MPs, like, can we kind of try to recreate some of those opportunities where we can actually get to know each other as people again. So
formalize the idea of the people across from you are opponents, not necessarily enemies. Like, you know, have a more thoughtful relationship that isn't based entirely on you wear red, you wear blue, never shall we, you know, get together.
Yeah, well, and this is, like I said, a hard thing to sort of to overcome. But you know, even a suggestion came up around, you know, formalizing or providing more resources for all party groups and friendship groups, which are not, you know, a big part of parliamentary life, but they are, again, places where MPs from different parties tend to have a place they come together around a common issue rather than a partisan cause.
What about, let's finish on this, strengthening the power of MPs over the party leader. That comes up a lot. A lot of MPs feel within their own party that they don't have enough say in what's happening at the top. Yeah, and I think broadly parties are going to deserve some more examination out of this work too, because this is coming out of a process. We've decided to select our leaders using mass membership votes rather than, you know, having a system where the caucus selects leaders. Not to say we need to go back to that, but that's where in Canada we've got a bit of a disconnect compared to the UK and Australia, where the caucus actually has a real say in whether the leader gets to stay on and who that leader is. I think we had some really positive conversations that came out of the last Parliament around the Reform Act, where there was, you know, how do we formalize a tool for caucus at least to be able to vote on, say, a leadership review or even the membership of their own caucus. I think it would be worth revisiting some of those changes. All right. I mean, for some people, this sounds like one of those inside the Beltway conversations, but the truth is that, you know, whatever you feel, if you're watching at home about the democratic process, I mean, this is a core part of it. How these people operate, how they feel, how they do their job, you know, gives you some idea of whether the process works or not. And and I think that's why we need to get it right too, because parties are the main vehicle if Canadians are who they think about when they vote. It's organized sort of by party labels. It's how you, if you want to join up and vote for a leader, it's through a party. So getting it right is really important if we want more Canadians to be involved in our democracy. All right, Jane, as always, thanks for your time. Thanks, Peter.